we are really going to dig into a novel that's, well, it's a masterpiece, but it's also always in the middle of some controversy.
A permanent flashpoint?
Exactly. We're talking about Kurt Vonnegut Jr.'s Slaughterhouse-Five.
And our mission today really is to look at the sources, the historical docs, the literary reviews, even modern news about censorship, to figure out why.
Why this book?
Yeah, why does this specific story, written by a World War II vet, still have so much power? It's not just a war novel, and it's definitely not just a sci-fi story.
No, it's something else. It feels like this profound meditation on trauma and on memory.
And on the words we use to, justify doing horrible things.
So, okay, let's get right to it. This book was published in 1969.
A long time ago.
Right. So why should we care about it right now? What's the one thing, the one hook at the heart of this that makes Slaughterhouse-Five not just relevant, but, actually kind of dangerous in 2024?
I think the hook is, it's the simple truth. You have a 22-year-old soldier. He sees something so horrific, a forbidden truth, really a massacre of civilians on a scale that nobody wanted to talk about.
And it messes him up so badly.
So badly that it takes him 25 years to even find a way to write about it. And here's the kicker.
What's that?
Even now, today, people are still trying to ban the book.
That's the conflict, isn't it? This isn't some dusty historical controversy.
Not at all. It's active. It's happening right now.
We're talking about school libraries in Tennessee pulling it from the shelves in, 2023?
And ongoing challenges in Florida just this year, in 2024. It's not slowing down.
And what's the charge they're leveling against it? What's the actual language they use when they try to get it banned?
The language is it's intense. You see school board members calling it depraved trash.
Wow.
Or morally offensive. The most common one, though, is anti-American propaganda.
Anti-American propaganda.
Yeah, that's the big one. And if you really dig into the sources of these complaints, you realize it's not really about, some swear words or sexuality.
It's about the message.
It's the core message.
Yeah.
The book just lays bare this devastating truth about modern war.
Right, yeah.
That even the quote-unquote good wars, the necessary ones, absolutely destroy the people who fight them. Morally, psychologically, they break them.
And that idea is, a huge threat to anyone trying to sell that simple, heroic story about conflict.
It completely undermines it. It's a truth that politicians and anyone who glorifies war wants to keep quiet.
I was looking at the sources, and one quote just jumped out at me. A school board member in Virginia demanding it be removed.
I think I know the one you mean.
She said they would not allow children to be exposed to anti-America literature that undermines respect for our military.
There it is.
So how do you even begin to square that? This book was written by a guy who was there, a combat veteran, a POW.
You can't square it. And that statement, that single sentence, holds the entire debate. The person saying that is demanding a story that makes them feel comfortable.
A sanitized version.
A sanitized, glorious memory of war. The version you use to recruit new soldiers and make politicians feel good about their decisions. But Vonnegut, the man who actually served...
He's drawing a line in the sand.
A huge one. He's saying, here's the difference between that shiny myth and the brutal, soul-crushing reality of trauma that soldiers actually bring home with them.
The book forces you to look at the price tag.
And looking at that price tag is seen as unpatriotic by the people who want you to believe the war was free.
So this whole debate, it's not really about literary merit at all.
No.
It's about truth versus a comfortable lie.
Exactly. Slaughterhouse-Five is Vonnegut standing up and saying, you will not use my pain to create comfortable patriotism. He's insisting on bearing witness to the waste, the horror.
And that refusal, that insistence, is what makes the book a target.
A permanent political target.
Okay, so before we get into the whole unstuck in time thing, which is, central to everything.
It really is.
Let's just lay out the basic non-spoiler premise. Who is our main guy? Billy Pilgrim.
Billy Pilgrim is maybe the most reluctant protagonist in American literature.
He doesn't really do anything.
He mostly has things happen to him. So the story is about him. He's an American soldier, gets captured in the Battle of the Bulge, and then he lives through one of the worst atrocities of the entire war.
The firebombing of Dresden.
The firebombing of Dresden, Germany.
And the setting of the book reflects his mental state, right? It's all over the place.
Completely intentionally, it jumps around constantly, almost violently, between three main places.
Sure.
First, you've got World War II, Europe, mostly 1944 and 45. It's just cold, chaotic, and terrifying.
Okay.
Then you jump to his post-war life. He's a successful optometrist in a small town in New York. It's mundane, it's safe, it's comfortable.
And the third place is a little different.
Just a little. The planet Tralfamadore.
Right, with the aliens.
With the aliens. We'll get to them.
And Billy Pilgrim himself is so important. He is the definition of an anti-hero.
Oh, absolutely. His main characteristic is just passivity. He's tall, he's awkward, he's just profoundly unheroic. He just sort of stumbles through the war and then through the rest of his life.
No agency.
Zero. Things happen to him. War, time, aliens, circumstance. He is just subjected to all of it. And that lack of control, that total bewilderment, that's Vonnegut's whole point about what it feels like to be a modern soldier.
Okay, now let's get into it. The spoiler section. The core mechanic of this whole novel.
The structural truth.
Billy becomes unstuck in time. He just, poof, jump from one moment in his life to any other in no particular order.
Yep, no warning, no control.
And we have to really analyze why this is so much more than just a cool sci-fi idea.
Right, because it's not a gimmick. That nonlinear structure, that's the whole revolution of the book. It's basically a literary manifestation of severe trauma.
So it's like a depiction of PTSD before we really had a public name for it.
Exactly. It's Vonnegut showing how a survivor's mind works. It's trying to survive by literally fleeing the present moment when it becomes unbearable.
So when he jumps from the meat locker in Dresden, which is hell,
The worst moment of his life.
to his quiet optometry office in the 60s, or, to a memory of his mom as a kid, that's his brain's defense mechanism kicking in.
100%. The continuous linear reality is just too painful to experience second by second.
It's too much to bear.
It is. I mean, think about it. If you use a normal story structure, beginning, middle, end, you're implying that the past is over, that it's contained.
That you can move on from it.
Right. And Vonnegut is saying that's a lie. For someone who's been through what Billy went through, the past is never over. It's always happening. It's right here, right now, alongside the present.
And this is where the aliens come in. The Tralfamadorians.
A blue toilet plunger-shaped aliens.
Who kidnap him and show him their view of time.
Yes, and their philosophy is the thing that lets Billy survive. It's like an emotional and intellectual crutch for him.
They teach him a kind of cosmic fatalism.
Exactly. They tell him that all moments in time, past, present, and future, they all exist at the same time, forever.
So time isn't a river, it's what?
It's a mountain range. You can see all the peaks and valleys at once. Every moment is permanent. And what they tell Billy is, you can just choose to look at the good moments. You can ignore the bad ones.
So that idea that a person is just like a bug trapped in amber,
Yes.
how does that actually give him comfort? Why would anyone want to believe they have no free will?
Because it lifts the burden of guilt, of responsibility. If the firebombing of Dresden was always going to happen, if it exists forever, then Billy isn't responsible for it. He didn't cause it. He can't change it. He's just a feature of that moment.
You can just mentally check out.
He can look at the absolute horror of his capture and the bombing, and then he can just leap in his mind to a happy moment, a sunny afternoon, the day his son was born.
The Tralfamadorians basically teach him how to compartmentalize.
On a cosmic scale, they reframe death for him. It's not an end. It's just one bad moment in a permanent life, and you can always choose to look at a better moment instead.
That is, wow. And it leads us right to the book's mantra, the phrase that follows every single mention of death.
So it goes.
So it goes.
It appears 106 times.
106.
It's such a chilling, powerful device. It said after 25,000 people are incinerated in Dresden, and it said after a bottle of champagne goes flat.
So it equalizes all death.
It does.
Yeah.
And it's the ultimate coping mechanism for a shell-shocked mind. It's this non-judgmental acceptance of loss, because if you actually tried to feel the full weight of every death, you would be completely crushed by it.
Is Vonnegut saying this is a good way to live? Is it an ethical stance?
I think that's the central question of the book, and I don't think he's endorsing it ethically. It's not a moral position, it's a psychological one.
It's about survival.
It's a psychological imperative. When you're faced with that kind of meaningless, industrialized mass death, your brain can't process the grief in a normal way. That phrase, so it goes, it's the sound of a survivor just taking a breath.
I'm not collapsing into madness.
Exactly, just moving on, because the only other option is complete and total emotional annihilation.
Okay, let's pivot from the book itself to the man who lived it,
Yeah.
to Kurt Vonnegut.
Yeah.
Because his story is so essential to all of this. What was he like before the war?
He was, I mean, the absolute picture of a mid-century middle-class American kid, 22 years old, from a good family in Indianapolis.
An aspiring writer?
Yep. He was studying biochemistry at Cornell, but he wanted to be a writer. And like so many young men of his generation, he enlisted.
And he bought into the propaganda, right? The heroic narrative.
Hook, line, and sinker. He was fed on all the cultural stories of duty and glory and, clean, necessary wars. He went in expecting to find purpose.
So he basically believed the exact myth that his own book would later just completely tear to shreds.
100%. And then reality hit him like a ton of bricks.
During the Battle of the Bulge.
In December of 44, he was captured, and the sources are really clear on this. His actual experience of combat had nothing to do with noble strategy. It was just chaos.
And incompetence.
Total bureaucratic incompetence, freezing to death, and just dumb random luck. He saw guys die from pneumonia, from friendly fire, nothing glorious about it.
And then after he's captured, they take him to Dresden.
Yes. As a POW, he's shipped to Dresden, which at that point was this incredible, untouched cultural city. People called it the Florence of the Elbe.
Not a major military target.
Very limited military significance. It was packed with refugees. And then came the firebombing.
February 13th, 1945. And he survives because he's sent to shelter in a literal underground meat locker.
Slaughterhouse-Five.
Slaughterhouse-Five.
The irony is just unbelievable. He and a handful of other American POWs are locked in this concrete basement of an old slaughterhouse while the entire city above them is just incinerated.
And it wasn't a normal bombing. It was a firestorm.
A firestorm. It's an aerodynamic horror show. The bombing creates so much heat that it creates its own weather system, sucking all the oxygen out of the air. Temperatures got high enough to melt glass, to fuse bodies to the pavement.
And when he came out, the man who went in was not the man who came out.
No. It was an apocalyptic landscape. The sources describe it as looking like the surface of the moon. Just ash and rubble. And then, to compound the trauma, he's given a job.
Well, cleanup duty.
For weeks, he and the other prisoners were assigned to a corpse detail. Their job was to go into the ruins, find the bodies, and bring them to huge pyres to be cremated.
And we're talking about an estimated 25,000 dead civilians.
At least. I mean, the sources here are just agonizing. He wasn't dealing with battlefield deaths. He was dealing with flash-incinerated civilians.
People who are just going about their lives.
Yes. There are descriptions of seeing bodies fused to the cobblestones by the heat, leaving these silhouettes like shadows burned into the rock. They would load the bodies that were still intact onto carts.
And the sources say they stacked them.
Like cordwood, that's the quote, just stacking human beings like logs.
And the smell. That's the thing that seemed to follow him for the rest of his life.
It was the defining sensory memory. The smell of thousands of burning human bodies. He described it as the sweet, cloying, unbearable stench. It gets into everything. And he said, for decades after, any random smell.
Like a barbecue.
Charcoal briquettes, melting asphalt on a hot summer day, burning plastic. Anything like that could trigger a flashback, and he'd be right back in the ruins of Dresden. The damage was immediate, and it was permanent.
And for decades after the war, he just couldn't talk about it.
His only defense was a kind of dismissive, cynical silence. He would try to brush it off. People would ask, and he'd just say, I was there when Dresden was destroyed, so what?
That's Billy Pilgrim right there, that numbness.
It is the absolute core of the trauma response. He was suffering from severe, untreated PTSD. We know from his letters and interviews that he tried to write about it in the 50s. He tried to write a normal, sellable war story.
But it just didn't work.
It was impossible for him. He had all these false starts, abandoned manuscripts.
Why do you think that traditional war novel structure just failed him so completely?
Because a traditional story demands a point. It demands meaning, a heroic arc, some kind of catharsis at the end.
And there was no meaning in Dresden.
There was no meaning, no heroism, and certainly no catharsis in the mass incineration of 25,000 men, women, and children. To try and force that reality into a neat 3-act structure felt like a profound betrayal of the truth. He knew he had to invent a completely new way of telling a story to even get close to what he experienced.
And this struggle, I mean, it took a real toll on him personally.
A huge toll. He was drinking very heavily. His marriage was under a lot of strain. His family talked about how he became more and more cynical, but it wasn't like a philosophical choice. It was a defense mechanism. It was born from carrying this enormous silent pain.
So what was the turning point? What finally cracked that wall of silence and let him write the book?
The sources all point to a conversation he had in the mid-60s. His daughter was studying history, and she just asked him a simple question.
What was it?
Why don't you ever talk about the war?
Wow.
It was the next generation. A generation that wasn't invested in the comforting myths of World War II. They were just demanding the truth.
And he realized his silence was actually a problem.
He had a profound realization. His silence wasn't protecting him or anyone else. It was a form of complicity. By not talking about Dresden, he was letting that heroic, clean narrative of war continue unchallenged. He was letting it get passed on to the next generation, who might be sent into a new conflict, blind to what it actually was.
So it became a duty.
It became a duty to share the trauma, not just to bury it, and that's what pushed him over the edge to finally commit it to paper in the only way he knew how, with this radical, fragmented, painfully honest structure.
We have to talk about the historical context here because the timing of all this is so critical.
It's everything. You have to understand two things: what Dresden meant and what was happening in America when the book finally came out.
Okay, so let's start with Dresden. We've said it wasn't a military target. But why was the bombing so sensitive for the Allies after the war?
Because it was an act of extreme late-war aggression. A lot of historians now call it terror bombing.
Psychological warfare against civilians.
That's exactly what it was. By February 45, the war was basically won. Dresden was a city known for its art and architecture, and it was filled with refugees running from the Russians. The bombing was meant to break German morale, plain and simple.
By destroying their culture and killing their civilians.
Right, and that creates a massive moral ambiguity that the victorious Allies just did not want to look at for decades. It complicated the clean narrative of the good war.
Which explains the 24-year gap between the event in 45 and the book's publication in 69.
That gap is the whole story. Post-war, America needed heroes. It needed simple victory. The country was building suburbs and celebrating. The last thing it wanted was a book about a traumatized American soldier who witnessed an Allied war crime.
The culture just wasn't ready for it.
Not even close. The sources talk about how he almost gave up on the manuscript entirely.
Right.
In 1967, he was just at rock bottom with it. Editors were rejecting it left and right. One rejection letter literally said, "Americans don't want to read about our boys being traumatized by war."
Wow. That's blunt.
The expectation was that soldiers came home in one of two ways: either perfectly fine or as a dignified, heroic casualty. The idea of lasting psychological damage was seen as weak or even unpatriotic.
So when the book finally does come out in 1969, the timing couldn't have been more explosive.
It was like dropping a match into a powder keg. It landed right at the absolute height of the Vietnam War.
And the entire country was tearing itself apart over that war.
Exactly. The old consensus about American military goodness was shattered. So when Slaughterhouse-Five showed up, young people, campus protesters, guys facing the draft, they didn't see it as a history book about their parents' war.
They saw it as being about their war.
They saw it as a manual for how to think about Vietnam.
Because it proved that even the most justified war in history, the fight against the Nazis,
was still chaotic and full of waste and created unimaginable psychological damage and killed tens of thousands of civilians by accident or on purpose.
it gave them the language to argue against Vietnam.
It gave them intellectual validation. It allowed a kid to say to his parents, look, if even the good war was this horrific and arbitrary, what does that tell you about this morally bankrupt war we're in right now?
And this wasn't just happening in dorm rooms. The Pentagon was paying attention.
Oh, they were absolutely paying attention. The sources show there were internal memos floating around the Department of Defense. They were worried.
They saw it as a threat.
A huge one. They labeled it subversive anti-war literature that was undermining recruitment efforts. They understood this book wasn't just a story, it was a tool. It was a guide on how to question every war, and it demanded a level of honesty they just weren't willing to give.
So the book became a direct threat to the military's ability to sell conflict to the public.
A direct threat to the whole military-industrial complex, and in many ways it still is.
Okay, this is the heart of the deep dive. The big ideas. It's more than a story, it's a philosophical machine. Let's start with the biggest theme of all: trauma and memory.
The whole fractured narrative, the unstuck in time, that is the theme, embodied in the structure. Vonnegut did something truly innovative. He showed that the way you build a story can itself be a form of telling the truth.
The jumping around isn't random.
It's the opposite of random. It's a perfect illustration of how trauma works. The traumatic past is never really past. It's always here, always leaking into the present moment.
So he's rejecting the whole idea that you can heal and just move on in a straight line.
He's saying that for some people, the damage is permanent. You can't write a neat, linear autobiography of your life if the defining moment was a catastrophe. Those moments are always active, always present. He's showing us that the only way to survive that is to fragment your own consciousness, to seek refuge in moments that aren't that moment.
Moving from the mind to the world, there's the theme of the absurdity of conflict. And this is where Vonnegut's famous dark humor comes in.
The absurdity is key. In Vonnegut's world, war is stripped of every last shred of nobility. It's not about heroes and villains making grand choices. It's about chaos, bad luck, stupid bureaucracy, and pointless death.
And the humor comes from smashing the horrific next to the totally mundane.
Exactly. Can you give us an example of that from the sources?
There's the moment when Billy and the other POWs are digging through the absolute devastation of Dresden, and they find this tiny, perfect porcelain figurine of a clock.
Right, this little symbol of orderly, civilized time, sitting there totally intact in the middle of the smoking ruins of a city where 25,000 people stopped existing in a single night.
It's so ridiculous, it's almost funny.
It is. And he writes about the most horrific things, like collecting and braining bodies, with the exact same deadpan, matter-of-fact tone he uses to describe Billy eating a candy bar back home.
That deadpan delivery, it's the engine of the humor. It stops you from just breaking down emotionally.
It forces you to think instead of just feel. You laugh, but it's a nervous, horrified kind of laugh. The comedy here is born from pure desperation. It's the only rational response to an irrational universe where all meaning has collapsed.
And it makes the horror digestible enough that you can actually look at it.
Without just shutting down completely.
Which brings us to this huge philosophical question in the book. Individual agency versus fate. This is all wrapped up in the Tralfamadorian idea of time, and so it goes. Is this really a fatalistic book?
I think it presents fatalism as a necessary tool for survival, but it doesn't endorse it as a final philosophy.
What do you mean?
For Billy Pilgrim, believing that he has no agency, that everything is predetermined, it frees him. It frees him from the crushing guilt of being a survivor, from the grief that would otherwise destroy him.
But here's the paradox, Ryan.
Yeah.
If the book is arguing for a fatalistic worldview where nothing can be changed, then why write an anti-war book in the first place? What's the point?
And that is the absolute genius of Slaughterhouse-Five. The fatalism is a critique of the scale of modern war. It's saying that for one little person up against firestorms and atom bombs, you are powerless. You are a bug in amber. But the act of writing the book, the act of Vonnegut breaking his 25-year silence to bear witness, that is the ultimate act of free will, the ultimate act of moral agency.
So the book's existence contradicts its own philosophy.
In a way. He shows us the fatalistic mindset you need to survive, but Vonnegut himself, the author, is screaming at us to take action, to break the silence, to prevent the next Dresden.
So the book itself is the anti-fatalistic statement.
Absolutely. Which leads to the final, maybe most important theme, rejecting propaganda. Vonnegut fundamentally refused to let his own trauma be twisted into a simple, heroic story that could be used to sell the next war.
He insisted on the messy, inconvenient truth.
He insisted on the complexity. He acknowledged, yes, we had to fight fascism, but he also insisted that we be honest about the cost of that fight. The psychological ruin, the civilian deaths, the cultural destruction, and that insistence on a nuanced, uncomfortable truth is precisely why the book is still being banned today by people who need the world to be simple.
Let's talk about Billy Pilgrim, because he's not just a character, he's a symbol.
A very carefully constructed symbol. He represents every casualty of war that the glorious monuments and parades refuse to acknowledge.
The psychological casualty.
Exactly. He is the ultimate anti-hero, and that's on purpose. He's designed to be the polar opposite of the heroes people were used to seeing.
The John Wayne type.
The absolute antithesis of John Wayne. Vonnegut makes him passive, confused, awkward. He's an optometrist, right? His job is to help people see clearly, but his own vision of his life is completely fragmented. War doesn't forge him into a hero, it shatters him into a time traveler.
And even his physical appearance when he's captured, it's designed to be absurd.
It's the scarecrow image. He's this tall, skinny kid, captured wearing a weird civilian coat that's way too small for him. He looks ridiculous and completely out of place. And that image just demolishes the myth that you can take any young man, give him a gun, and he'll instantly become a disciplined warrior.
He's just a scared kid.
A child in the middle of the biggest, most destructive event in human history.
And his reaction when he's captured is so telling. He's not defiant, he's relieved.
He's just grateful to be alive and off the front lines. He's not worried about military honor or fighting to the last man. And this was so important for Vonnegut to show. This is how most people, most conscripts who aren't natural-born killers, actually experience war, with terror, confusion, and just a desperate hope to survive.
But at the time, that portrayal was seen as a huge insult.
A massive insult. Critics, conservative groups, even some veterans organizations, they were furious. They said Billy Pilgrim was an insult to every American who served with honor.
But they were missing the point.
Completely. He wasn't mocking their service. He was redefining honor. He was arguing that true honor means being honest about the full cost. Billy isn't a symbol of dishonor. He's a symbol of psychological honesty. He is the quiet guy at the VFW hall who can't tell you the glorious war stories because his trauma is too real and too deep for those cliches.
Let's get into the craft of the novel, the technical genius. Because to tell this story, Vonnegut basically had to invent a new style.
He really did. And that unstuck in time narrative is the key innovation.
How does it work on the reader beyond just showing us what trauma feels like?
It's a literary defense mechanism for the reader, too. Vonnegut knew he couldn't tell the story of Dresden linearly because it would just be too relentlessly horrible. It would be unbearable. So he builds a story that constantly pulls you out.
It gives you a break.
It gives you a break. You're in the horror of the meat locker, and then boom, you're back in the quiet of the optometry office. The structure forces you to confront the trauma, but it doesn't let you drown in it. It puts you right inside Billy's fragmented mind.
And then there's the power of repetition. Though 106, so it goes.
That repetition is like a drum beat throughout the entire novel, a funeral drum.
What does that constant repetition do to you as you're reading?
It does two brilliant things at once. First, by saying it after a city is destroyed and after a bottle of champagne dies, it flattens everything. It conditions you to see death as a common, everyday event, not some big dramatic climax.
It numbs you to it.
It numbs you, but, and this is the genius part, by doing it 106 times, the cumulative weight of all that loss becomes immense. It's relentless. He forces you, page by page, to acknowledge the constant presence of death, big and small, until it becomes the central fact of the entire book.
And finally, the dark humor. How did he get that tone, that deadpan, matter-of-fact style?
He uses incredibly simple prose, almost like a child's storybook, especially when he's describing the worst things imaginable. There's no flowery language, no deep emotional narration. When he talks about the Dresden cleanup, the sentences are short, declarative. They mimic the emotional numbness you'd need to just get through that task.
So it's the lack of emotion that makes it so powerful.
Exactly. The style forces you, the reader, to supply the horror and the moral outrage. He never tells you, this was terrible. He just describes it with the same casual tone he uses for an optometrist convention. And that gap between the event and the description is where the book's power lives. It's the ultimate anti-propaganda tool.
So let's talk about how the book was received, then versus now. Because when it came out in '69, the country just exploded.
It was immediate and it was completely polarized. It was a perfect reflection of how divided America was during Vietnam.
The younger generation, the anti-war movement, they saw it as a kind of Bible.
Absolute validation. Here was a real World War II vet saying that the official story was a lie, that even the best wars were a messy, tragic business. The book got passed around college campuses like a secret text.
But the establishment and a lot of the older generation, they were outraged.
The backlash was immediate. They called it unpatriotic, said it spat on the graves of the greatest generation. And the literary critics were just as divided. They couldn't decide if it was serious literature or, because of the aliens and time travel, just sci-fi pulp.
But the most important reaction, the one that really changed things, came from a group of people who had been silent for 25 years.
The veterans themselves, this is the crucial part of the story. Vonnegut's publisher was flooded with letters from World War II vets who had never, ever talked about their combat experiences.
Oh, what did they say?
They said, thank you. They said, you finally found the words for what happened to me. They felt seen.
So the book that was being attacked as anti-veteran was actually helping veterans heal.
It was a profound tool for solidarity. The sources have these incredible accounts, like one from a veteran of the Pacific Theater who wrote that reading about Billy Pilgrim's fragmented mind made him feel less crazy. He realized his nightmares and his numbness weren't a personal failing. They were a normal human response to an inhuman experience.
There's a release valve.
For an entire generation of men who had been told to just shut up and get over it.
And now, fast forward 50-plus years, and it's still a battleground.
Still, the same arguments, just in a different decade. The censorship attempts are constant, especially in the South.
And is it still about being anti-American? Or are the reasons different now?
The official complaints today often hide behind things like profanity or sexuality. They'll point to a swear word or the brief nudity when Billy is on Tralfamadore. But if you read the minutes from the school board meetings, the real agenda is clear.
And that is?
It's the fear that the book will make kids question authority, that it will make them question the purpose and integrity of the military. It's a deep fear of nuance.
So the fact that they're still trying to ban it is actually proof of its power.
It's the ultimate proof that it never lost its revolutionary edge. It's a firewall against propaganda, and it demands that every new generation has to wrestle with the real, messy, unheroic truth of war.
The book's influence also went way beyond just literature. It almost seems to have predicted a medical diagnosis.
It's an incredible part of its legacy. It basically described post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD, with perfect accuracy years before that term was formalized and entered the public consciousness.
Billy's Unstuck in Time is just a perfect description of flashbacks.
It's flashbacks, intrusive memories, emotional numbness. It's the whole package. He gave a literary shape to a psychological condition that was still largely invisible.
And because of that, it became incredibly important for veterans of later wars.
Immensely. Guys coming back from Vietnam and later from Iraq and Afghanistan, they read Billy Pilgrim and they saw themselves. He gave them a pre-made cultural script to understand their own broken reality. They could just say, I feel like Billy Pilgrim, and people would get it.
And the sources say it's now actually used in therapy.
Yes, by military psychologists. We found this one doctor, Sarah Chen at Walter Reed, who says she uses the book to help patients understand their own PTSD. She tells them, your flashbacks, your time traveling, that's not a sign that you're weak or crazy. It's evidence of wounds that need healing.
Vonnegut gave them permission to be wounded.
He did. So you have this amazing paradox, the Vonnegut effect.
The book heals veterans while making the military's recruiting job harder.
Exactly. It fundamentally challenged the heroic narrative in our culture. It created a healthy, generation-wide skepticism that's still here today. Recruiters have to deal with young people who read Vonnegut who know that the real story is more complicated than the commercials.
And connecting all this to right now, his demand that we focus on the human cost feels more urgent than ever in the digital age.
It's a shocking contrast to how we talk about war now. Drone strikes are surgical, civilian casualties are collateral damage. Everything is designed to create psychological distance.
And Vonnegut just smashes that distance.
He forces you to look. He demands that you remember the smell of burning bodies, the sight of people stacked like cordwood, the permanent shatter inside the mind of the person who saw it all. He forces you to connect the political decision to the reality of flesh and blood.
So as we start to bring this all together, what's the one key takeaway from now? The central lesson from Vonnegut's whole struggle with this book?
For me, it all comes down to his battle with silence. For decades, he tried to bury it, but he finally realized that his trauma contained a truth, the truth about senseless destruction, and that this truth was too important for society to lose.
It wasn't just his story anymore.
It became a public duty. He moved past his own pain and decided he had a moral imperative to remember Dresden, not for himself, but for everyone else, to hopefully prevent it from happening again.
The book really forces you to hold two contradictory ideas in your head at the same time. You have to honor the sacrifice of the individual soldier,
while also questioning and rejecting the systems that glorify war and send them there in the first place.
It's a demand for a more complex patriotism.
An informed patriotism, not a blind one. It teaches that the cost of war isn't just in bodies, it's in broken minds. You have to count both before you start shooting.
So if you're a reader who wants nuance over slogans,
and if you're fascinated by how a story's structure can be its deepest message, then Slaughterhouse-Five is just, it's essential.
It's the antidote to easy history.
Absolutely.
Okay, before we go, let's end with a couple of fascinating, kind of chilling details that really drive home how close we came to never having this book at all.
The near disaster. I mean, this is just incredible. In 1967, Vonnegut was so depressed, so defeated by the constant rejections and the weight of the memory itself.
What did he do?
He was in Paris, and he seriously considered just throwing the entire finished manuscript into the Seine River, just letting it go forever.
Wow.
We were one moment of despair away from losing one of the most important novels of the 20th century, all because the culture just wasn't ready to hear what it had to say.
That really puts a different spin on So It Goes.
It really does. And then there's the core paradox of the book's style. It's one of the most powerful anti-war statements ever written, but there are no speeches in it.
No lectures.
None. The message comes through entirely in the feeling. The accumulated impact, the dark humor, the fragmented story, the absurdity, it changes your mind by showing, not by telling.
And let's bring it back to the veterans one last time. The way they have embraced it now is the ultimate proof of its truth.
It's the final vindication. There's a quote in the sources from an Iraq War veteran, Marcus Rodriguez.
What did he say?
He said that Billy Pilgrim was the first fictional character that made him feel less alone and less crazy for having the specific PTSD symptoms that he had. The book's greatest legacy is its ability to take the private chaos of a broken mind and turn it into a shared, understandable human experience.
So what does this all mean?
I think Slaughterhouse-Five teaches us that some silences are far more dangerous than any truth you could ever speak. They tried to burn this book, they tried to ban this book, and they're still trying because they knew then and they know now just how powerful it is to truly bear witness.
It means the story they don't want told is usually the one we need most. It means we have a duty to keep reading, to keep questioning, and to keep discussing why certain truths are constantly silenced. Until next time, so it goes.